This is CBS 42's College Football Saturday Pregame, presented by Pepsi.
Jordan-Hare Stadium on a sunny Saturday afternoon in late November. It can only mean one thing. It is Iron Bowl time here on CBS 42. The Auburn Tigers just got through their Tiger Walk outside of Jordan-Hare Stadium, going inside the field at Pat Dye Field, and this place is going to be raucous come 2:30 for kickoff. Chris Brees and Jim Dunaway here on the College Football Saturday postgame show. So glad to have you with us. The sun's shining bright in our eyes. We've got hospitality galore with all the cupcakes they're serving us. It's going to be a good day of football.
Oh, it is, and a perfect weather day. I know Ashley may get into that a little bit later on, but walking around campus, the fans are tailgating. Everybody's in a great spirit. It really is a holiday for our entire state, no matter whether you're orange and blue or crimson and white.
We have heard so many people say this game is going to be a blowout today. 21 points for Alabama. You got to realize, though, they've lost 3 of their last 4 at Jordan-Hare Stadium. If there's any team in the country that gives Alabama fits, it's not Georgia. It may not even be Clemson. It is the Auburn Tigers and what they have done. Now, the question is, do they have the talent to do it today?
There's not anybody wearing crimson and white today that's won in that stadium, right?
Exactly.
To do that?
Yep.
So they know what it feels like to lose in this stadium. So nobody's taking anything for granted walking down here before they play Georgia for the SEC championship next week.
It has been a house of horrors for Nick Saban. He's 3-4 in Iron Bowl games on the road. He's lost 2 straight. 6 of 7 have been by 2 scores or less. So anybody out there who thinks that this is going to be a blowout is sorely mistaken, and these Alabama players certainly know that. Taylor Kaufman live there on the field at Jordan-Hare. Nick Saban knows better than anybody. They're going to get their best shot.
Good afternoon, Chris. The day is finally here. As we know, this is a rivalry unlike any other, and records don't matter when Auburn and Alabama meet on the football field. And for fans, this is really the only win that matters at the end of the day. But both teams have been locked in all week ahead of this year's Iron Bowl.
Good. Well, I think in games like this, big rivalry games, a lot of emotion, playing on the road. Be a very emotional environment that we play in. It's really important that players can stay focused on the task at hand.
The thing that stands out is the way these guys play and the consistency that they play with, and it's hard to do that week in and week out.
Oh, most definitely. I knew from the first time I met Bryce at All-American, I knew he was going to be a Heisman contender. Bryce is very smart. I'm pretty sure you guys can see on the field, but outside, I've had classes with Bryce, everything. Bryce is a smart person, and his ability in the football field is even more surprising. He's very smart on the field. The numbers that he's putting up, the stats that he had this year, everything of how he handled everything, especially last year. I feel like he's a great person on and off the field, and he's very, 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 very talented.
I think he's really good on his feet. So when he doesn't have anything downfield, I think really trying to keep him contained in our pass rush and get him out the pocket and just close him down, wrapping him up.
Yeah, I've heard. I've definitely heard a lot of stories about how intense it is, how loud it is, how crazy an environment it is. So that's something that we know going in. It's obviously a huge rivalry. It means a lot, to everyone in the state. It means a lot to us.
Just to be able to be starting in this game is a unbelievable experience, and I can't wait.
Alabama needs this win to keep their playoff hopes alive, while Auburn is fighting to stay with a winning record to end Brian Harsin's first year at the head of the program. Brees?
And it may not be very fair to Brian Harsin to compare him to previous Auburn coaches who have coached in the Iron Bowl. In fact, you go by this stat here, 5th straight time an Auburn coach in their first Iron Bowl gets it at home. Now, Terry Bowden won, and of course, Gus Malzahn won. Tuberville and Gene Chizik didn't win. Obviously, Brian Harsin is up against it today. The fact that this season has gotten to where it was, because we're looking at October 30th. Think about that. They dominate Ole Miss, and we're all saying, what an Iron Bowl we're going to have for the SEC West. Who's going to face Georgia? And now here we are 3 weeks later after Auburn scores 9 points in the second half of their last 3 games.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Brian Harsin was ahead of schedule after the win over Ole Miss, was still slightly ahead of schedule after the next loss. Then they were on schedule, and then now they're behind schedule after the loss to South Carolina. So it has turned in from what was heading to be a great year for Harsin. Now it is turning into, man, an upset today would save the year for Brian Harsin, or really it's going to be a disappointment.
Hey, well, you could say if it's a close game, it wouldn't be a disappointment.
Right.
And it's not fair to Harsin because Terry Bowden, who did he have to compete with? You know, Gus Malzahn had 2 miracles happen his first year.
Yep.
That's why they were so good in that year. So I don't feel like it's fair to Brian Harsin to judge off of today and some of those losses the last few weeks.
Yeah, I mean, 93 was an 11-0 perfect season for Terry Bowden, ineligible to go to the bowl game. Gus Malzahn won that game and went on and should have won a national championship. Those 2 teams' rosters very different than the one playing today for Auburn.
And no matter what happens today, there will be some antsy Tiger fans wondering what happens in the offseason with this program. Ashley Gann is there outside of Tiger Walk to soak in all the festivities at Jordan-Hare.
Yeah, soaking in all the festivities and all the sunshine today. What a beautiful day for the Iron Bowl. The Tiger Walk just wrapped up. You can kind of see the fans all crowding. It's been good energy here today. I think maybe the weather has something to do with that. I won't take full credit for the weather for today, though, but I know fans really starting to flood into the stadium right now, and folks are in for a great Iron Bowl. We're going to meet up hopefully with some fans later on because I've seen a lot of both Alabama and Auburn fans today. It's going to be a great day at Jordan-Hare. We'll be back in just a minute.
This is CBS 42's College Football Saturday Pregame, presented by Pepsi.
Well, I don't think there's a player in the history of the Auburn program who would be dying to get on the field as much as Bo Nix is today. He's out for at least the rest of this regular season with an injury. TJ Finley will take the guard at quarterback, and Bo will try to rally his troops from the sideline. And, of course, anytime you talk about Alabama and Auburn, the conversation is going to come up. Who is the greatest Alabama head coach ever? Is it Nick Saban? Is it Bear Bryant? Well, the career numbers for both maybe could tell the story, but maybe not. Just during their time at Alabama, it's staggering that Bryant's got 57 more wins than Saban, of course, 10 more seasons under his belt. Bryant also had the edge in SEC titles and Iron Bowl wins. The 2 are tied with 6 national championships at Alabama. But boy, you really feel like Nick Saban eventually, it could be this year, it could be 8 years from now, could end up beating Bear Bryant for titles at Alabama. D. Jackson's back in our Birmingham studios right now, and there was an iconic moment in this Auburn-Alabama game for Bear Bryant in one specific season.
Yeah, I got to tell you, Breeze, it's hard to believe it was 40 years ago. My family actually lived on Pearson Avenue near West End High School, and I remember our neighbors Lucy and Bando Galt telling me to always remember this particular Iron Bowl because something special was about to happen.
I'd like for the people to remember me as being a winner, because I ain't never been nothing but a winner.
Those words never rang out as loud as they did following Alabama's 1981 28-17 Iron Bowl victory over Auburn. Bear Bryant surpassed Alonzo Staggs, becoming college football's all-time winningest head coach. The larger-than-life figure from Morro Bottom, Arkansas, had attained celebrity status and was arguably the second most famous man in America.
Coach Bryant, it gives me great pleasure to congratulate you for becoming the winningest coach in football history. Some people don't like to admit it, but America loves a winner. Today in Alabama and all over the United States, being a winner becomes synonymous with Coach Bear Bryant.
And for those who saw it firsthand, they walked away with a lifetime of memories.
I'm thankful for the opportunity and to play for such a great coach, and I would say a great person, great man.
All-American Jeremiah Castile remembers the week leading up to the game and also thinks back to how the genius of Bear Bryant came full circle in one of the most famous plays from that game.
There's a play Lenny Patrick makes, a run he makes in that 3-15 game. And the prior spring, Lenny got a little trouble missing curfew in the spring, and Lenny Patrick got the ball every play. And until he literally couldn't get up off the ground. That was Coach Bryant's way of punishing him for for being late for curfew.
The game itself had plenty of drama. Pat Dye was in his first year at Auburn, with the Tigers being a 13-point underdog. They led 17-14 with 12:58 in the fourth. But quarterback Walter Lewis led an impressive drive and found Jesse Bendros to take the lead for Alabama. They added another Lenny Patrick touchdown on their way to history, as Bear Bryant had reached the top of the mountain. And with that type of success comes a lot of responsibility. But just as he took it all in stride, Coach Bryant made sure his players understood the true secret to success.
I really, under Coach Bryant, came to understand you have to work. It's W-O-R-K. And your success is going to be based on your work. And one of the things he says is, man, I don't believe in luck. You're going to have to work.
Hard work, dedication, and character. All words to describe one of the greatest in college football history, who left us with more than just an impressive resume. Always the Southern gentleman, Bear Bryant always knew what to say when it came to his biggest win against his biggest rival.
I want to thank all the people who were there, and Auburn and Alabama was a great game, a great series. It's going to get better every year.
Now, Bryant finished his career with 323 total wins. He's been passed several times over the years, but Nick Saban still has a long way to catch Bryant. Saban comes in at 266 wins in his career. And during his radio show this week, Saban had a message for Tide fans who've been critical of some of their close wins this season.
When I came here, everybody was happy to win a game. All right, now we're not happy to win a game anymore. We're not happy to win a game at all. All right, we think we should win games by whatever. And I don't think that's fair to the players either. All right, because our players work their butt off, all right, to be the best that they can be. And they're not perfect. All right, they're just college students. They go to school every day. They got to study. All right, they have to run extra after practice when they miss study hall. I mean, come on, give me a break. This is not professional football. And you know what else? Nobody wants to win worse than they do. Yep. Not me, not you. I don't care what kind of fan you are. So for all you self-absorbed folks out there that can't look past your own self, all right, to appreciate what other people are doing.
That microphone's still smoking. Chris and Jim, some pretty explosive comments from Coach Saban there. Never afraid to tell it like it is.
I have a few favorites of his rants. Yeah. Tin Horn comes to mind. 2015, dead, buried, and gone when they lost to Ole Miss. This is now my new favorite.
Oh, that's fantastic. And listen, Coach Bryant always had a saying, the price of victory is high, so are the rewards. What Nick Saban was telling you there is the fact that the guys that are doing the price of victory, are the ones wearing the uniform, and all of us are reaping the rewards, media, the fans, and everything. So don't demand more than the people who are actually paying the price. But I think if you go back to 09, 11, 12, 15, 17, and 20, okay, you didn't hear a quote like that from Nick Saban.
You didn't need to.
You didn't need to. It's these kind of years where you need to appreciate the wins a little more, because it's a little bit of a struggle for them to get victories this year.
There's still years they can win a national championship. I think the reason why it resonates so much is the fact that what did he say that was false? Oh, who doesn't agree with what he said?
Yeah, exactly. And all the people clapping because it became a revival.
Were probably the people who were also booing the team.
Not self-aware enough to know that they're talking about you, and they're talking about me, and they're talking about you.
Well, if they can win this game against Bryan Harsin's first-year Auburn Tigers, it'll erase a little bit. And, of course, they'll have Georgia next week for the SEC Championship. We'll talk about if Alabama can even lose that game against Georgia and make the college football playoff. Of course, there are a lot of great traditions here on the Auburn campus, whether it's Alabama week or not. One of them is the rolling of Toomer's Corner. Where does the history start with that? Well, everybody differs in their opinion of where it started, but there is one former Auburn player who could be credited back in the 70s, that Bama punt game, for why this really got going for this Iron Bowl rivalry in every game that Auburn plays that they get a victory. Before we go to break, this is going to be the first Iron Bowl at Jordan-Hare since the passing of former Auburn head coach Pat Dye. And it just might be the most influential person, Pat Dye, in this long storied rivalry. Why? Well, he was the one who helped introduce the game to Auburn and Alabama, get it out of Birmingham's Legion Field. They had their first home game in 1989 at Jordan-Hare. That was thanks to Pat Dye. Alabama followed suit in 2000, about a decade later. We'll be right back after this.
This is CBS 42's College Football Saturday Pregame, presented by Pepsi.
Bryan Harsin took the podium 346 days ago when he became the coach at Auburn. And he knew the Iron Bowl was real when the first question was about beating Alabama. And now here he is, almost a year later, live on the field with a chance to do exactly that in his first year under the Tigers. And if they somehow can pull that off upset, you'll see plenty of this on Saturday. This was back in 2017 after the Tigers beat then #1 Alabama at home. And you may be asking yourself, what about those poor shrubs being trampled by the students? Well, Auburn's stadium crew already has a plan for that.
Yeah, so we've been there before, so we kind of know the program. So we'll clean up all the trash here, take all the dead branches, cut all the dead out, daylight to get some sunlight in, and start growing back in with water and fertilizer. Yeah, it would be painful if we had another home game, but being the last game, we'll take this, every other year.
It is a problem that they would love desperately to have. First, they storm the field, and then they go roll Toomer's Corner in that order. Now, there's a lot of differing opinions about where the history comes from Toomer's Corner and throwing that teepee on those famous oak trees. Some people will say it dates back about 100 years, but there's one Auburn player who talked to our Ani Lindenberg who will debate that fact.
You have to go back to the late 1800s. Toomer's Drugs was the only place in town with a telegraph. When employees got news of an away game win for the Tigers, they would hang that ticker tape on wires out front. When the telegraph became obsolete, fans still gathered at Toomer's to celebrate a win. But it all changed for good leading up to the 1972 Iron Bowl, with one comment made by an Auburn football player. That football player was beloved tailback Terry Henley. He and I met up at Toomer's Corner to practice our technique. In '72, Henley and his teammates were called the Amazings, and they were amazing in spite of losing some incredible players the year before.
Pat Sullivan, Terry Beasley graduated the year before, and we had only 3 returning starters on offense, and we just had a great football team. We ended up beating 5 top 10 teams, so you do that, you got a pretty good team.
Auburn was #9 going into the Iron Bowl, Alabama #2. Henley made a quick comment about that on the campus radio station Weagle.
Terry said, you know, you've got a great season going, now you face Alabama, #2 team in the country. What do you think? I said, well, the only thing I can tell you is we're going to beat the #2 out of them.
The phrase quickly spread across campus. It became a rallying cry. Then, in Legion Field, it happened.
They got it. Block kick. Ball back to the 25. Picked up on the bounce at the 25.
Auburn beat the #2 team in the country. It was the famous punt-Bama punt game. Final score, 17-16, Auburn.
Sitting in the dressing room after the game, and someone came up to me, I believe it was David Howes, and said, you're not going to believe that Auburn is covered in toilet tissue right now.
And so the tradition was solidified. If you want to celebrate an Auburn victory, any Auburn victory, you head to Toomer's Corner with toilet paper in hand. For Henley, the even bigger takeaway from 1972 was friendship.
Wins and losses come and go. Your relationships, Pat Sullivan said this many times, your relationships that you make on that team will last forever, okay? And Lord, I wouldn't take anything for any of those guys on that 72 team.
Some people suggest Auburn was rolled with toilet paper prior to the 1972 Iron Bowl, but most would agree Henley's comments made rolling Toomers a permanent fixture in Auburn. The 2 newest oaks still aren't being rolled, but every other tree around there is. And yes, there is a team devoted to cleaning up all that toilet paper after the celebration. Back to you.
And I would say it is clearly their favorite tradition to do, especially after they beat Alabama. Now, Bryan Harsin has a lot going for him for this Auburn team, but beating Alabama, of course, is what every first-year coach wants to do, and it's been a mixed bag since 1981. Pat Dye lost, Terry Bowden won, Tommy Tuberville lost. He did pretty good against Bama, though, in his career. Gene Chizik went up against a national championship-type team for Alabama, and Gus Malzahn had the crazy pick-6 in 2017. Bryan Harsin, how about this for a stat, Jim? Did you know that Nick Saban was 6-2 in his first year at Alabama before he played Auburn, of course, and finished 6-6.
Well,
Brian Harsin was 6-2.
Wow.
He could be 6-6 after playing Alabama.
I did not remember that. I do remember Nick Saban talking often about losing that very first game. You know, Brian Harsin this year to me is really what I was in college. I was a C student, and that's what this team has become this year. It's become a C-plus season. But as you said, if you pass your final exam, what happens to that final grade? It shoots way up at the end.
And what happens when you're a C student at the end of the day? Do you care at the end of your career for Brian Harsin if you're a C student your first year?
Yeah.
No one's going to remember 3 straight losses. Let's say they lose today. No one's going to remember that. If Auburn's playing for SEC titles 3 years from now, who's going to look at 2021? Nobody.
That's right. Pat Dye lost that first one, beat Alabama, ended the 10-year streak the very next year, and you go through them. Tuberville won 6 in a row, one for the thumb. I mean, even the guys who lose the first time in this rivalry, they learn about the rivalry and they bounce back. Just look at the other coach, Nick Saban, lost the first one, has done pretty good since.
And Harsin's been very honest. He doesn't know much about this rivalry, being from Boise State. He's going to be indoctrinated very quickly this afternoon here on CBS 42. We have so much more to get to on our pregame show, including some history being made throughout the state of Alabama. The AHSAA has sanctioned girls flag football for the first time ever, and that state championship game is coming up in a couple of days. Taylor Kaufman is going to look at the historic first season coming up next.
This is CBS 42's College Football Saturday Pregame, presented by Pepsi.
It was a great evening of high school football last night across the entire state of Alabama. And we've got a busy Super 7 next weekend at Protective Stadium at UAB. Thompson in the 7A, Clay Chalkville and Hueytown in the 6A, Pleasant Grove in the 5A, Aniana in the 4A, and Piedmont in the 3A. But before all of that happened, some history being made Wednesday afternoon before that 7A Thompson game. Girls high school flag football has been sanctioned in the state of Alabama. It's a story that our Taylor Kaufman has followed all year long, and this week, Taylor, they're finally going to settle it on the field, on the big stage, too.
That's right, Chris. Alabama has now sanctioned girls flag football as a high school sport, and like all other high school sports, this inaugural season will end with a state champion. Now, from week 1 to where they're at now, this sport has grown so much, but who better to tell you that than the girls themselves?
We are very excited for the very first game. We're just going to bring it on, and it's only up from here.
Yeah.
Period. What she said.
It might not seem like a contact sport, but you do get hit a lot.
As the inaugural flag football season went on, the excitement grew.
Last game we had half the school there. It was ridiculous. Like, with so much support, like, we're just going to show out.
And the competition got better.
Week 1, we were just trying to figure it all out and get over all the bumps, and we have improved so much. I've actually learned more than I knew about football now, and I'm like wanting to watch it now because I used to not know anything about it.
The season started with 44 teams across the state, and Smith Station made history as one of the final 2 teams standing. Their dads able to watch them play football on high school's biggest stage.
The most exciting thing I've ever, I'm speechless. I'm very proud. I'm so proud.
They'll be playing in Alabama's first ever flag football state championship.
It's amazing. I mean, not many people do this at our school, and to be the first team in Smith Station, first flag football team, and to make it this far, it's amazing.
It's Smith Station and Hewitt-Trussville going head-to-head in the title game at Protective Stadium. Both teams wanting to be the first to etch their names in the record books.
Well, we're just going to come in acting like it's the best team we've ever played, you know, just coming in with a strong mindset.
Win or lose, both teams are part of history. And like they said at the beginning, it's only up from here.
For me, you know, I believe in girls. I think they're powerful. I think they can do anything they want to. And this right here proves that. I think that it's going to get really big. And I know a couple people from different states want to start bringing it to there. So we're glad to be one of the first. And hopefully it'll catch on around the world.
For me, one of the coolest things was to see the dads' reactions after that semifinal game. Again, the state championship is set for Wednesday, December 1st at 3 p.m. at Protective Stadium. Brees, we'll send it back to you.
And did you notice the song that was playing in the background of that piece from Taylor? I'll tell you who runs the world of the Heisman favorite talk. It's Bryce Young for Alabama. He has been absolutely fantastic, and this weekend he can really bolster himself. He should feel confident going into today. In the Saban era, Bama's 8 Heisman finalists have gone 7-1 against Auburn. The only loss, of course, A.J. McCarron in the pick-6 game. Eventual Heisman winners Mark Ingram, Derrick Henry, and Devontae Smith all won their Iron Bowls and went on to win a national championship as well. So many great quarterbacks in the history of this rivalry. Bryce Young could certainly stamp himself into that. D. Jackson back with us live in the Birmingham studio with a conversation with 2 old-school Alabama quarterbacks.
Absolutely. You know, actually playing quarterback in this game can bring plenty of attention. You know, 50 years ago, Auburn's Pat Sullivan took home the Heisman Trophy. And only a select few will ever know what it's like to be the starting quarterback for the University of Alabama. Recently, I had a chance to catch up with 2 local legends who have a very unique perspective and bond when it comes to leading the Tide to a national championship.
Bama trying to take the lead late in the half. Here's the snap. Pressure off the edge. Here's the throw. Mechie open. Touchdown, Alabama.
It's one of the most exclusive fraternities in all of college football. Bryce, Mac, Tua, Jalen, Coker, AJ, McElroy, and Barker. They all have a unique perspective on the brotherhood that comes with being the starting quarterback at Alabama. But for Gary and Jeff Rutledge, that takes on a completely different meaning.
Well, I was fortunate that I had Gary to look up to, and we were brothers that loved each other and played with each other and pulled for one another, even though he was older than me. And then when he went to Alabama, I was so excited for him.
The Rutledge brothers are the only siblings to start at quarterback at Alabama. Gary ran the wishbone to perfection in 1973, leading the Tide to the national championship. And Jeff anchored Coach Bryant's 1978 national championship team. Big brother Gary was an inspiration to Jeff and didn't realize it until years later.
No, at the time I didn't think about it. I was just trying to make the high school football team and trying to make the team in Alabama. So I didn't think about it much, but yes, like we said, we love each other. We're close to each other. We were then, we are now. And just to see that he surpassed me, I was so proud of him to play 14 years of pro ball, and I just like to think that I taught him everything he knew.
Jeff took everything he'd learned along the way, starting from his days at Banks High School, the University of Alabama, and on to the pros. And while he was primarily a backup in the NFL, he credits his Alabama roots for building his character.
I knew that things could change, and Coach Bryant always said, expect the unexpected. And I always went into a game expecting to be able to play, so I prepared that way. And if I didn't hear Coach Bryant say that all the time, I would have just gotten up there going, well, I'm not going to play, and I wouldn't have been prepared.
And of course, both brothers have fond memories of playing in the biggest game of the year.
In the 72 year, we got our punts blocked, and we lost, 17-16. And I remember the bumper sticker said, punt, Bama, punt. Well, the next year in 73, we played them, and Coach Bryant had us fired up, and I was the starting quarterback. And Coach Bryant really was, wanted revenge. And so we ended up winning 35-0. And the bumper sticker said, score, Auburn, score. So I remember that.
Just, you grow up Alabama fan, you can't wait for the Alabama-Auburn game. And that was the game you looked to. It wasn't any other game, and you didn't care what record Auburn had, and didn't care what record we had. It was Alabama-Auburn game. It was bragging rights for a year. And believe me, as you know, and it is true today, whoever wins that game, they talk about it for a year. And as a player, you didn't want to lose that game because that was a long year between, one year to the next. And I was fortunate we never had to deal with that.
Now, the Rutledge brothers are not the only Rutledges to star at Alabama. They credit their athletic talents to their dad, Jack, who played baseball for the Tide. And coming up next, Jack Royer goes one-on-one with the president of the University of Alabama, Dr. Stuart Bell, to find out what's going on with the campus, but off the football field. Plus, Bryce Young is our Iron Bowl player spotlight, and he wants to get where these guys are Alabama's last 3 starting quarterbacks are all starters in the NFL, but can he do what Mac Jones, Tua, and Jalen Hurts never did? Win the Heisman. We break down the race for college football's most prestigious award. Right, coming up next. You're watching CBS 42 College Football Saturday.
This is CBS 42's College Football Saturday Pregame, presented by Pepsi.
You will not find a bigger ghost town than the road team for the Iron Bowl. This year it's Tuscaloosa. This is a shot of our Tuscaloosa cam overlooking Bryant-Denny Stadium. Our morning anchor, Jack Royer, got the lowdown from the president of Alabama about the future of athletics and so much more.
That's right. Dr. Stuart Bell's been the president of the University of Alabama now for 7 years. A nuclear engineer by trade, now he's leading the largest university in the state. We sat down for a wide-ranging conversation about his job and what the future holds for the capstone.
What have you learned from day one to now? What's changed for you?
You know, fast forward now in 7 years, we've really accomplished an awful lot at the university.
Dr. Stuart Bell has learned on the job, leading an institution with a storied history, and he says a bright future.
The young people love the University of Alabama, want to be here, but they have these great dreams, and I think I have even a greater appreciation clearly now of how we help them fulfill those and see their careers that can be impactful. And that's exciting.
Bell brags about UA's impact in researching various fields and the school's expansion of programs that allow students to mix curriculums, like business and STEM fields, for example, amid continuous growth in enrollment.
The demand for the University of Alabama, as you kind of pointed to, is extremely high. We had 45,000 applications last year for our incoming freshman class, and so I do get to visit with many students and with parents.
The University of Alabama has been focused on growth for decades. The school went from 18,000 enrolled students in 1997 to 20,000 in 2003. It's been a boom ever since. The school's current enrollment sits just above 38,000. Among those students, the majority now are women, and more than half come from outside the state of Alabama, including 92 different countries.
What do you say to the general population about what it costs to go to school today?
You're touching on something that's very important to us, and that is to keep the cost of education down. And I think we were probably the first institution in the state to, in the last 10 years, to begin not increasing our tuition.
He and system leaders have, like all of us, dealt with COVID-19's effect on learning and business, only recently dropping mask requirements as new vaccine rules take effect soon.
How do you manage that sort of challenge as a leader?
One, COVID is not in our mission statement. And the point in that is we are still preparing young people to be the solutions to the challenges that we face in the state and all across the nation, and we can't take our eye off that ball.
When you are remembered 100 years from now, what do you hope people say, boy, Dr. Bell did so many things for the university and it started with this priority?
Well, I do hope that serving the state and serving our students is something that this university will always be known for. And my heart and passion is always for students and what they're able to achieve during their time here. And then it is really cool in higher education that then I'm able to have a tailgate on my front yard and invite back alums and get the snapshot of what they've been able to achieve because of what we're doing today. There's not many other places that you're able to, in really vivid color, you can see, here's what we're doing today. Here's going to be the outcome of those young people. And boy, it is exciting. It's exciting.
Bell's not focused on his own legacy right now. Instead, he says he's focused on continuing to grow and recruit for the University of Alabama. Brees, back to you.
Yeah. And last night on CBS 42's Road to the Iron Bowl, we shared Jack's exclusive interview with Auburn president, Dr. Jay Gooch. If you missed that, go to our website, cbs42.com to watch.
With time to watch the film, I thought there are good things I did. I think there's still a lot of room for me to improve. I think there's obviously positives and negatives, that you take away from every game, individually and collectively as a team, as a unit.
Now, don't you dare call it an off year for the Heisman Trophy in 2021. Lo and behold, Bryce Young might be the campaign's leader right now. he and C.J. Stroud, the young quarterback from Ohio State, probably 1-2 if you go by the Vegas odds makers. And of course, C.J. in progress against Michigan right now. Bryce has a real chance to get his name on the map with a big game against Auburn this weekend and Georgia next weekend. Do you think it's safe to say right now, if they voted, he would win the Heisman?
I would say going in this morning before the Ohio State game started, it was C.J. Stroud who would have won the voting. Okay. But the way C.J.'s playing right now, the door is open for Bryce Young. But if you're an Alabama fan, it is TGFBY. Thank God for Bryce Young. Because the way that offensive line's been this year, Alabama would be leading the nation in sacks given up if it wasn't for his ability to do what he does.
Here's the way I look at it, because you want to see their stats. They are identical, literally identical numbers. Think about it this way. Ohio State has, this year, the best receiving core in the country. They have what Alabama had 2 years ago with Jerry Jeudy and all those guys. Think about Jamison Williams, who couldn't even make the field for Ohio State. Yes. That is what Bryce Young's working with. Not to say Jamison Williams is a bad receiver. He's up for the Blitnikoff Award. What he's working with is not what C.J. Stroud's working with.
No, exactly. And listen, it's no knock against Bryce Young if he ends up being second in the voting or third in the voting. I just think there's a great deal nationally of a lot of Alabama fatigue, and you had an Alabama guy win the Heisman last year. I think a lot of people will factor that into the voting as well.
And you got to wonder how many Southern voters are going to go for Will Anderson, Alabama's linebacker as well. C.J. Stroud could easily eat up what voters they would get. And Ohio State's still in progress against Michigan. We'll get to that here a little bit on the pregame show. When we return, lots of great traditions from the Auburn Tigers. We've shown you plenty of them, but there might be one that you're not very familiar about. Well, we are going to introduce it to you really quick. Auburn's POW seat and what that means to all of their missing veterans around the world. And of course, TJ Finley will try to be the man to beat Alabama for the third straight time at Jordan-Hare Stadium. It is his game to win for the Auburn Tigers. Crazier things have happened. We'll be right back.
This is CBS 42's College Football Saturday Pregame, presented by Pepsi.
It has been a sad week for the University of Alabama and for journalism really anywhere, not just in sports. Cecil Hurt has passed away after so many great years of covering the Alabama Crimson Tide and all things college football. Cecil had been in the hospital with pneumonia and passed away earlier this week. And of course, everybody in the Crimson Tide family is reeling from the loss.
I know it was his passion to do a great job in terms of how he covered, Alabama athletics. He was a good friend. He was actually a trusted companion to me. I confided a lot of things in him. He never violated my trust. I thought the guy was one of the brightest, neatest big picture thinkers, ever that I've been associated with.
And people may not realize that Nick Saban was close with Cecil Hurt, and when he says those words, you truly believe it. I've only been here 7 years, so my interaction with Cecil was nothing compared to somebody like you.
Well, two things. One, when you get the job at the University of Alabama and you're on the university plane, they explain to you, as Mal Moore did to Nick Saban when he hired him on the flight up from Miami, there are two people that you have to win over at the news conference. It's Paul Feinbaum and it's Cecil Hurt, and that was very important to Nick Saban to become friends with both of those guys because it can impact you on the job you do. And for me as a young sportscaster in the market, I could always tell by reading Cecil's work whenever the coach at Alabama, whether it was football or basketball, when his time had come to an end. Before the university would announce it, I could tell by Cecil's writing that the big money boosters had given up on the guy, and I could start looking towards the one news release that would be coming that the coach would be fired.
And you say that, the fact that young men and women aspiring 30 years ago, and even right now, still looked up to Cecil Hurt for 3 to 4 decades.
That's right.
That's how long his legacy has been.
Yeah, fantastic. And Coach Bryant and Charlie Thornton are the two guys that came up with the program that fed Cecil from the journalism school into sports information that started his career. The only job he ever had was with the Tuscaloosa News.
We are still thinking about Cecil Hurt's loved ones passed away way too soon. Of course, traditions galore for the Auburn Tigers. They're all going to remember Cecil Hurt just as much as Alabama will. Taylor Kaufman back with us live on the field for one tradition you may know absolutely nothing about, but you should, Taylor.
Right, Chris. Over 87,000 seats in Jordan-Hare Stadium. It's going to be a packed house today, but one seat will remain empty. In 2019, Auburn added a seat in the front row of the south end zone for prisoners of war and those missing in action. Now, the installation of the seat didn't get very much publicity because for the university, it was never about getting recognition.
If people see it and they hear about it, it has nothing to do with Auburn. It's everything to do with just the reminder of the sacrifice and why that's so important.
As of now, nearly 1,600 Americans haven't made it back from war and are either missing or unaccounted for. 30 of them are Alabamians.
And they were, sons and daughters and brothers and sisters, and some of them may have even been Auburn alumni or fans. We always say, hey, this seat is saved for you for when you come home. And for the families, this is a chair that's always ready for you and empty and waiting for you when you come back. So that's really what it symbolizes.
This seat can be found in the front row behind the south end zone of Jordan-Hare Stadium. The athletic department put it there, but the student government funded the installation, and Auburn's military members protect it.
You may have an Army-Navy type of rivalry, but we're all doing this for the same reasons, and we're doing it together.
Our midshipmen, the Army cadets, the Air Force cadets, they kind of guard the chair. They're strategically kind of place the chair in an area where it's easy for them to watch after it. And then our Student Veterans Association, they kind of maintain the cleanliness of it and keep it maintained throughout the week and get it ready for game day.
Every Saturday, this seat serves as a reminder of those who haven't made it home, declaring they will not be forgotten.
I think it means that there's something bigger than ourselves. It's designed to know that we're not going to forget anybody, from the past, present, or future. We're all in this together, and we'll always be so.
This is just an honor to them, and really, it's just to symbolize that there's always hope that they do make it home, and just to remember the sacrifices that they made.
Now, it's important to mention that Alabama also has a POW MIA seat, a truly honorable act by both universities to tell our servicemen and women that they're not going to be forgotten and they'll always have a seat when they come home. Grace, we'll send it back to you.
Yeah, and Taylor, I know you have another story, military related, coming up a little bit later in the pregame show. You do not want to miss it. We're going to take a break. When we return, Jim and I are going to talk about crazy playoff scenarios and what that would entail for Alabama, win or lose this game, or win or lose against Georgia next weekend. And Ashley Gann's already found some Auburn fans. What about Alabama? How many of them are going to show up at Jordan-Hare Stadium today? We'll be right back after this.
This is CBS 42's College Football Saturday Pregame, presented by Pepsi.
We are still keeping an eye across the country of what's going to happen with the college football playoff. 2 games going on right now in progress that could dictate what happens in a few weeks. Georgia, everybody knew they'd take care of business against Georgia Tech, but it is a rivalry game, 38-0. And the game up in Ann Arbor, Michigan, the Wolverines lead Ohio State 28-13. There is still plenty of time for the Buckeyes to come back, about 23 minutes left in that one. We love a good scenario talk in college football. D. Jackson, back in Birmingham, give it to us, please.
Come on, D. Oh, boy. It takes a lot of maneuvering with all this stuff, guys. At 10-1, it's clear that Alabama controls its own destiny, right? You beat Auburn today, and you take out top seed Georgia next week, and they're in the playoffs. The fact that the Tide dropped to 3 in the playoff rankings on Tuesday really doesn't matter as long as they win out. But it is a huge deal if they lose another game and hope to still get in. Let's say Ohio State, Georgia, and Cincinnati all win out, and Bama gets its second loss next week in Atlanta. The Tide would then be competing for that 4th spot with a 1-loss Big 12 champion, either Oklahoma or Oklahoma State, and 1-loss Notre Dame. Now, if Alabama's loss to Georgia is razor thin, do the Tide simply fall to number 4? By falling 1 spot in the rankings this week, it makes it much easier for the committee to bump Alabama out of the top 4. There's even talk that a 2-loss Bama could stay in the top 4 and bump an undefeated Cincinnati out. Checking our CBS 42 Twitter mailbag, Tyler Schwartz says While Alabama might be one of the 4 best teams, they need to earn their way in. Losing 2 games would not meet that standard whatsoever. Chris and Jim, got to ask you guys, what is your expert opinions?
There is a difference between who's a top 4 team and who deserves to get in, because it's a different conversation. Is Alabama a top 4 team no matter what scenario you go through? I say yes. The problem is what you're about to say.
Yeah, I think if Alabama loses again, whether it's here or in Atlanta, I don't think a 2-loss Alabama gets in.
No matter how close that game would be.
Yeah, I think a better chance for a 2-loss Alabama getting in would be to lose here today and win next week and be conference champion. That throws that denominator into that factor. I just feel like there's a lot of Alabama fatigue, and that if there's anyone else, like a 1-loss Notre Dame and a 2-loss Alabama, I think the vote would go Notre Dame, even though in your mind you know Alabama, I think, would beat Notre Dame straight up. You got to earn it. I agree with the mailbag.
And you would have to debate, okay, would the committee really feel like if Alabama played Notre Dame would be the better team? Fatigue is the word for that.
Right.
I want to look at the Big 12 champion. Does a 2-loss Big 12 champion, Baylor, Oklahoma State could play each other twice. Do they get in over a 2-loss Alabama?
Listen, I've grown up as an Alabama guy, right? But if I'm in that room and I've got a 2-loss non-conference champion and a 2-loss conference champion, I'm going with the 2-loss conference champion of the Power 5. I'd go with the Big 12 champion.
Would it matter if there was chaos in Atlanta? Let's say a kick 6 happened, or a pick 6 to end the game.
Yeah, I mean,
would that matter?
Yeah.
Technically, it wouldn't.
Yeah, well, bad call, or a close game, a last-second 62-yard field goal like Texas Tech had to win a game earlier this year. Something like that, you may factor that into it. But back to what the mailbag said. I think you have to earn your way in, and Alabama's won so many of these things. I think Alabama fans would appreciate the fact that there's a level you want to be a playoff team, and another loss, I don't think that team reaches that level.
They can earn it with 2 straight wins against 2 hated rivals. Ashley Gann back with us with some fans there. You had Auburn at the Tiger Walk. What do you have for us this time?
We have some Auburn and Alabama fans. Iron Bowl is always one of those split days, whether it's friendships, whether it's family. And we have a friendship divided. Today with me is Scotty as well as Cindy. Now, we're going first. Now, who do you think's going to win, Auburn or Alabama?
Actually, I'll leave you with this. Roll Tide, not tumors.
Roll Tide, not tumors. All right. This is a lot of fun, guys. All right, I'm going to let you round it out here. Give me a big War Eagle. Roll Tide. Here we go. War Eagle. Tide. We'll be back in a bit.
This is CBS 42's College Football Saturday Pregame, presented by Pepsi.
Well, it is a passing of the torch for Auburn's flying mascot. Spirit the Eagle flew her last flight inside Jordan-Hare Stadium during that Mississippi State game a few weeks ago. She was named Honorary War Eagle during a halftime ceremony in recognition of her service since 2002. So many iconic figures, moments for these Auburn Tigers, especially in the Iron Bowl or just in general. Taylor Kaufman now back with us live inside the stadium for another iconic moment. This one just solidifies and embodies all things toughness with Iron Bowl and Alabama-Auburn.
Right, Brees. Could you imagine walking from Tuscaloosa to Auburn? Well, a group of people did that this week. Members from both universities came together and walked for a good cause. Who do you think is going to win?
Alabama, Roll Tide.
Auburn's definitely going to win. War Eagle.
Opposing sides came together this week to walk all the way from Bryant-Denny Stadium to Jordan-Hare over a span of 3 days.
There's going to be a lot of good times, a lot of bad times, a lot of good times.
Alabama and Auburn Student Veterans Associations made the 151-mile trek together. They call this mission Operation Iron Ruck.
The Iron Bowl is the biggest rivalry in college football, if not in all sports of America. And it's amazing that these two groups of people who are supposed to hate each other on Iron Bowl week can come together and do this event together and pretend to like each other for 4 days. And for a cause that's a lot bigger than any one of us and even college football.
That cause is bringing awareness to veteran suicide rates.
Right now, there's an average of 17 veterans that kill themselves daily. And we're working together to, it's a small part in a much larger picture, trying to just bring that number down to 0 as much as we can. A couple years ago, it was at 22 average, and just recently we've been told it was moved down to 17. So
There are easier ways to bring attention to this topic, but that's not the point.
yeah, so I mean, it sucks. It's a lot of work. You get a lot of blisters, a lot of pains, a lot of aches. But again, like it's for a greater cause. So if we suffer for 3-4 days together, that helps, or that can show the light on to people that it's okay to kind of suffer. Because there's some veterans out there that suffer every day, and they can't just take off a pack and stop walking. They're suffering daily.
This is Slade Salmon's 4th Iron Ruck, and he's heard firsthand how this has helped veterans.
And a lot of them will even say, you know, I was going through a hard time in my life, and I saw some of your saw the message that y'all had and put out, and I reached out to somebody.
What's that mean to you?
That's huge. I mean, I wish that we could save more, but you know, even if we save one life, like that's huge.
It's important to know that if someone you know or if you are going through a tough time, it's okay to reach out to someone, and we encourage you to do so. And if you want to donate to this cause, you could do so by hopping onto Facebook and searching Operation Iron Ruck. One last thing I want to mention, these men and women arrived here in Auburn last night and had a bonfire, and they delivered the game ball here today. Such a cool thing to incorporate into this game, I think. Brees, back to you.
Yeah, you think they make any excuses in their lives? What tough leadership from those men and women for both Alabama and Auburn's ROTC. Before we go to break, a quick check on our college football leaderboard standings. You can still sign up and play. CBS42.com. Jim and I will be right back.
This is CBS 42's College Football Saturday Pregame, presented by Pepsi.
TJ Finley set to get his second start against Alabama. His first one for the Auburn Tigers, as the other one, ironically, was for the LSU Tigers when they took on Alabama when he was a backup quarterback in that role last year. And while the Iron Bowl isn't the oldest SEC rivalry, that's Auburn-Georgia, of course, it's arguably the most heated one. The very first meeting coming in Birmingham's Lakeview Baseball Park in February of 1893. Yes, February, a little bit different back then. Auburn claimed a 32-22 win over Alabama. The game was the Tide's first ever against an actual college. Their previous two games were against Birmingham High School and the Birmingham Athletic Club. What a weird transpiration we've had of history of not only college football, but this Iron Bowl in specific. For more on that, D. Jackson back in our Birmingham studios.
I tell you, Brees, with 85 meetings between the Tide and Tigers, we would need all day to talk about every single unforgettable moment. But here's just a few rivalry moments throughout the years. We begin way back in 1948, which was the 13th meeting in the series, but also the first meeting since 1907. The 1908 game was suspended due to, get this, a $34 dispute in the game contract and player per diems. Now that would begin a 40-year drought. Alabama would win the 1948 game 55-0 at Legion Field, which remains the largest margin of victory in series history. Fast forward now 34 years to 1982. With 2 minutes left, Auburn scored a touchdown when Bo Jackson jumped over the top of the defensive line. You know it, Bo over the top. The Tigers won 23-22, ending Alabama's 9-game winning streak over Auburn. This was also the last Iron Bowl coached by Bear Bryant, who retired after the season. He died 60 days after that game. And you didn't think we would go all show without mentioning the 2013 game, also known as the Kick Six game. Tied at 28, Auburn's Chris Davis took Adam Griffin's short field goal attempt 109 yards for the game-winning touchdown with no time remaining. Auburn would go on to win the SEC championship before falling to Florida State in the BCS National Championship. You know, we could go on and on with historic moments. 1964 was the first Iron Bowl broadcast on national television. Quarterback Joe Namath, remember him? He led Alabama to a 21-14 victory. The 2000 Iron Bowl was the first played in Bryant-Denny Stadium, and Auburn kicked 3 field goals to beat Alabama 9-0. This is also the last time Alabama's ever been shut out. Maybe today's game will provide another historic moment we'll be talking about for a lifetime. Hey, coming up, the keys to the game for the 86th Iron Bowl. Number 3, Alabama at Auburn. Is there a path to victory for the heavy underdog Tigers? Chris and Jim will share their final thoughts.
This is CBS 42's College Football Saturday Pregame, presented by Pepsi.
Well, Nick Saban loves playing on the road, but he has not loved playing at Jordan-Hare Stadium the last handful of years. We know his record against the Tigers on the road. Can he buck that trend with what he feels like is a much better team statistically on the field, but they still have to play the game? And it's a rivalry that is littered with big-time moments and catchphrases. Bo over the top, punt, Bama punt, the comeback, the pick six. What's going to happen in 2021? Who is going to cement themselves in history of Iron Bowl lore?
These two teams are our major league teams. In the state of Alabama, we don't have Major League Baseball. We don't have the NFL, the NHL, the NBA. You know, these two teams are the major league franchise.
This is a team that has shown improvement throughout the season. And now it is having to work through a great deal of adversity. That puts a great deal of pressure on Auburn. They're having to deal with a great deal of adversity going into the Iron Bowl. And oh, by the way, you're facing the defending national champion and a team that has its eyes on another national championship.
This is CBS 42's Keys to the Game, sponsored by Robertson Banking Company.
Well, Jim, what do you say we talk about the actual game? Because we've got about 90 minutes of not doing keys to the game. For me, it feels like Auburn cannot rely on the pass game. Alabama's been so good, top 5 when it comes to rush defense. Auburn's got to run the ball, and that's always been the case.
Yeah, tank, tank, tank is what I'd be chanting if I was an Auburn fan. And listen, there's been close games and losses for Alabama this year. If Auburn wins the game today, I think this will look a lot like Alabama and Florida, and not really like Alabama, Arkansas, or Alabama and LSU, those close wins for Alabama. It's got to look more like Alabama, Florida, I think, for Auburn to have a chance today.
And if you go by Nick Saban's rant on Wednesday, that would be just fine for Crimson Tide fans.
That's right.
To me, it seems like this is a lot like 2015 and 2016, where it's a one-score game going into halftime, and then all of a sudden a couple of big plays. Bama wins by multiple scores, and you look back and you say, well, that wasn't that close of a game. I think it's a close game at halftime.
Well, first off, this is the best setting for the Iron Bowl to me. No disrespect to when the game's in Tuscaloosa, but I love it when it's here because of the factor you don't know what you're going to get in the game, and Alabama comes in highly ranked. Alabama's defense has to be on the same page. No easy scores today, just for the confidence going into the SEC championship game next week. And for Auburn, you got to protect TJ Finley. I feel like this sets up for Will Anderson to have a huge day without Bo Nix in the game.
13.5 sacks, leads the country in that, 26 tackles for loss. He could easily cement this Bama defense in this game and almost win it on his own. It feels like to me, if Bama's going to win, big plays for Bryce Young, and that's all that matters for them.
Yeah, Bryce Young, keep him healthy, keep Brian Robinson healthy, and let Will Anderson hunt, and I think Alabama wins it.
National coverage coming up next. We'll be back with you on the postgame show at 6 o'clock for 2 hours here on CBS 42's College Football Saturday. We'll see you then.